Hey everyone, this is Apropos Books' first book club meeting. Today we are going to review the first 10 chapters of Spark of the Everflame. Correct? Yeah. I get it mixed up because there's three of them and yeah. And I am Travis, co-founder of Apropos Book.
And I'm Jamie, the other co-founder.
All right. So if you guys have been reading along with us, go ahead and drop comments into the comment section below on what you thought, what your takes were on the first 10 chapters, or if you've read this. Book club is just starting up, so likely no one's following along with us. Shameless plug. If you want to, join our book club. But if you've read it, let us know what you thought up to, through chapter 10 for this week.
It's really hard. I find myself wanting to read ahead because I'm like, finally got hooked on it. And I'm like, ooh, what's going to happen? Yeah. But for the sake of this, I don't want to do that. So I don't talk about things that haven't happened.
Yeah, because then you have the tendency to be like, oh, well, just wait until,
Oh, totally guilty. I think I did that on our last book. I'm like, just wait until you get to this part.
By the way, this is expect spoilers. We're just chatting as if a couple friends reading a book together. So if you don't want spoilers, that's your warning right now.
So well, I know when I started this, one thing I noticed for myself going into, I read a lot of like urban fantasy and romance, and there's not a lot of world building because it's here. So since I haven't read a whole lot of fantasy in like the past like 7-8 years, these types of books just start really slow for me and like getting into them. Once I'm into it, I'm like, I'm ready to tear through the book. So, and this one was kind of like that too. It took about 4 or 5 chapters before I started getting really, really into it. And that all started when Diem went to the castle.
Yeah, for me, well, I read, fantasy, sci-fi. I tend to like a little bit more of the grimdark side, I guess. And of course, Brandon Sanderson, that seems to have to be, it has to be a requirement for fantasy and sci-fi geeks. But I don't read a lot of romance, and if I do, it's gay romance. So starting this up, it being young adult, and it being romantasy, felt a little strange to me, and I'm trying to put aside, I don't tend to jive a lot with most romances. And a lot of young adults lately, I don't seem to jive with either. The thing that kept, and I thought it was going to be really, really hard for me to actually enjoy the story, was she has like big pick me energy. Like, oh, I'm not like other girls. Like, I've got my daggers on my side. And I think in the first chapter, she mentioned her daggers like 3 times. And I'm like, okay, we get it. You fight. Like, and I kind of feel like that may be a young adult trope. And, that's something that is expected or common in young adult. But I just kind of feel like it's done so frequently that, she could have mentioned it once and we could have got like, oh, okay, she fights or she has weapons, so she knows how to use them. And yeah, for me, the one thing that really sticks out to me early on that I did like, and I don't know if this was intentional by the author or not, was she was talking about the fireweed. It's the fireweed or fire root.
God, I knew. It's something like that. The fire root, I think it is.
Yeah. When she stopped taking it and other people were noticing like, oh, you've been angry lately. And it just felt so familiar to when, you stop taking anxiety pills. You don't notice that your attitude has changed, but the people around you do. And I thought that was kind of neat because she didn't realize, that anything was different. But other people did. So I thought that was, I don't know if that was intentional or not.
Well, Speaking of it's flame root, by the way.
Flame root. There you go.
I know. I just looked it up because I'm like, I'm gonna call it something ridiculous, and oh, that's what happened. Anyway, with the flame root, I feel like one, I think Diem is a descendant, and because there's like vague mention of her father, she doesn't know who he is, he disappeared, blah blah blah, all of that, and then there's all of these like signs and things that are happening to her since she stopped taking the flame root. But then in like chapter 8, I think it is, where they're in that other realm and finding out that the flame root is heavily regulated by the crown. It's like maybe it's because it is a depressant type thing and it dampens their powers and their abilities, and that's why it's so heavily regulated. But then it's like, how did her mother come across it? How did she get it so freely? Why were they so frivolous with how they handled it?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm leaning into as well with her mother. For me, I'm kind of like torn between, is she part descendant, or is she going to be something from, the original religion? Because Henry, is it? Yeah. I'm bad with names. Henry having that tattoo on his back of the Everflame kind of made me wonder, is she going to be something that was originally from this world, like Descended, but at the same time mentioning the flame root and why it's so regulated, it doesn't make sense that it would both dampen her power as someone on this earth and their power as well. And I think it very much is a fact that it's regulated because it has an adverse effect on the descendants. So I think I'm leaning a little bit more towards, her being a descendant of descendants.
Oh gosh, yeah. And then like, what is the prince's name?
Luther.
Okay. So another thing I noticed is, and this is like, it's got to be a romance thing, because whenever the author describes how the man smells, that is going to be the love interest, because we have no idea what Henry smells like, and they've already had sex. So you can just tell, like, this is where that's going to be at, and this, yeah, it's just funny.
Speaking of, well, a couple things there. One, so the king's name, I don't know how it's spelled because I'm an audiobook reader, but it's pronounced in the book Older. And then she said the son's name was Luther. And at first I thought she said Uther. And I'm like, what the hell? Because Mortal City, like that, what kind of name is that? Like, and then, yeah, but no, his name was Luther. I had to listen closely because I was like, what's up with this naming?
I'll eventually, just starting out and only having encountered him like once. It's like, I'll remember the name later.
So the thing for me is, the sex scene coming along, I feel like, being completely outside the genre, it reads much younger to me. So it felt strange to me that some of the way that she writes, it's easy to read, but it also feels kind of juvenile. And then when they had like the sex scene, I'm like, that's a little.
Yeah, it was very PG. And I'm wondering if because he's not the FMC's like main love interest, if that's the reason it was the way it was, or maybe that's because it is a more young adult book. That's how it is. I've never really read this style of romantasy before. So it's kind of figuring out like what between like the different age groups, how they handle that kind of interaction.
So so far in the book, do you have a favorite character?
Not yet. I do like kind of the back and forth between Luther and Diem, so I feel like that's going to be the build, and he may end up being one of the characters I like. I'm trying to decide though if he's going to be a bad guy and it's going to be like an enemies to lover situation, or how that's going to play out, because it's like what happened between him and her mom that made her, and I'm almost positive she's just in like deep hiding right now, because I can't imagine that she had all of these backup plans like made for if something like this happened. But then it's also like, if she doesn't make good on her deal with the crown, then they're coming after her son. So I'm a little torn, but I'm almost positive she's in like deep hiding.
I just thought of something about her mom, and it was when they were on their way to get more supplies from that lady. He mentioned how the women in the military were spies. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if her mom is on some spy mission for the crown. Yeah, I that just kind of came up, and I'm like, oh, well, that would make sense that there's no contact, and she just suddenly went missing.
Long ass time.
Yeah, I know, right? So for me, I think probably the character, if I had to pick one that I like, would be the brother. And I think it's just because I like his snarky attitude, but he's not really in there. I fully expect me to like some secondary character along the way, because it's very rare that I really jive with a main character. So I'm expecting that I'll probably end up really liking some secondary character along the way.
Yeah, like at the moment, I kind of like Henry. The way that he talked to her when he thought she wasn't paying attention to him, it really reminded me of like how you and I interact. Just say something really stupid, and you'd be like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah, I thought that was pretty fun. That actually made me laugh when that happened, because I knew what he was doing as soon as he said it, and so I laughed, and yeah. That was pretty funny.
Yeah, I found that amusing. I don't remember anything else, if there was anything major I wanted to touch on, because anything else that jumped out for you?
So not really anything that jumped out for me yet, no. But we did mention earlier we wanted to discuss predictions. Do we have any? And this will probably be really fun if anybody's watching that's read the book, because then they can be like, haha, no, you're wrong.
Haha, you're an idiot. Well, we kind of talked about it. We're pretty, we talked about Diem and the theory of what her ancestry is. That her and Luther are going to have this ultimate, like, they're going to be in love in some capacity. I just not entirely sure, like, if he's going to be some sort of bad guy or not, since he's like the soon-to-be king. What would be really interesting, though, is if she was part of the original old world. And my assumption, because it is Spark of the Everflame, that that's probably what it is. If there's like some sort of like connection between them, I just don't know what that is yet.
So I had this, I kind of had this thought yesterday when I was listening to it. She had killed the wolf and it had turned into like ash. And then they went on to talk about the people living close to the Everflame, like in the afterlife, it burned away their body, and then their soul was warmed by the Everflame. And it kind of made me think, and they would call those the sparks of the Everflame. And it kind of made me feel like that's her.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's something like she's some kind of avatar for this other religion, or possibly these descended are really part of their religion, just in a different capacity and taking it over. But obviously she's going to be the spark of the Everflame, because she's the main character and that's the book. But it does make me think that there is going to be some kind of revolution, and I feel like Luther is going to be the side of the descended that aren't like all the other ones, like that don't mortals as lesser or whatever.
Yeah. And this is why I hate just having to stop, because I have questions that I want answers to.
I am not super hooked on the book, but I'm also don't dislike it.
Yeah.
So, and that's surprising for me because you know, I really struggle with romantasy. But it's encouraging that I don't hate it. So
Well,
and
if the romantic aspect is how it has been, then it shouldn't be too like,
yeah.
why
Yeah,
are you taking me into this level of romance?
because I really like Shadow and Bone, and you know, there was romance in it, but it wasn't the main plot.
Yeah.
You know, and I was fine with that. But you know, and I try to, whenever I find myself getting a little bit more critical of something I'm reading, or feeling like I don't have as many patience for it, I'm just like, okay, this isn't your typical genre. You know, just you don't know. So I tried not to. I'm going to in additional videos, not like nitpick or whatever. But those are my initial reactions going into Romantasy, which it really surprises me because, you know, back in the day, we both read Mercedes Lackey.
I was just thinking that, like, we read Mercedes Lackey, and that was like old school romantasy back.
Yeah, it was so heavy with romance, and I never realized it until I went back to try to read it, and I'm like, oh, this is sad, but what the hell happened to me?
And that just shows how your tastes change over time.
Yeah, this is true. So yeah, no, it's not bad. I am enjoying it for the most part. So I would say initial reaction, like if I had to rate the book right now, I would say probably 3 stars for me. Just because of a lot of it seems very surface level at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it has like interested me enough that I don't want to put it down, but it also like I'm not like jonesing to get back to it.
Yeah, it's like a slow burn to start.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that is indicative of romantasy, because I noticed it when I read Anathema, and it was like so much backstory and slow like build until it finally like part 2 just blew up. But I'm wondering if that's just something that's common with romantasy. It's like the world building, the background story. This is where they came from, where they are, and why they are the way they are, kind of thing. And then it finally hooks and like carries you through the story.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. Maybe that's why I have a hard time with some books, is because of that element of world building. And I also think that, you know, I get so used to a set of characters that when I try to switch to another set, like after a book that I've really enjoyed, it makes it difficult because, well, they're not this person, you know.
Exactly. And like, you know, we came into this knowing that we would be picking books that are outside of our normal reading genre. Well, I mean, romantasy is not too far outside of what I normally read, but I usually tend darker. So, you know, we picked things that we knew may be a little bit of a struggle for us to get into, but we wanted to be able to talk about books again.
Yeah, we read such different genres that we can never really talk about the book that we're reading because we don't read the same things. So it is nice. It is nice to be able to chat with someone about books. Like, I don't have anybody that really reads the stuff that I read. It was so bad that when I was reading Wind and Truth, I had to actually go into a Stormlight group and be like, hey, does anyone want to be my reading buddy? Like, I want to talk to someone about what's going on, but the only other person that's reading this, it reads really slow because he's only reading on his drive to work and drive home. And yeah, so I had to find like a complete stranger to talk about Wind and Truth with.
I mean, if any of you have that issue and you're like wanting to have somebody to talk to, just definitely respond and interact with us. We're super into like finding out your thoughts and you can listen to us to have our takeaways and what we're learning or what we're anticipating happening, and just kind of follow along with us. And eventually we'll probably turn these into a more live session, but for the meantime, we're going to do a little bit more one-on-one with just the two of us.
Yep. Yeah. But my intention is that we'll start doing lives as it gets bigger. That way, we can see comments coming in and interact with people in real time. And
yeah,
I think that'll be a lot more fun. So yeah. Awesome.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you for listening to our very first coffee chat, and we hope that you follow along with us and pick up Spark of the Everflame.
Yeah, we'll see you around next week for the next set of chapters. What is it? I think until through 21.
I believe so. It's like 10 chapters.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.